Hey, I think it'll work.
Of course.
It's a cinch. You know, it may be crazy, but we're gonna do it. The Dueling Cavalier is now a musical. Hot dog!
Hallelujah!
Whoopee! Fellas, I feel this is my lucky day, March 23rd.
Oh, no, your lucky day's the 24th.
What do you mean the 24th?
It's 1:30 already. It's morning.
Yes. And what a lovely morning. Good morning.
Good morning. We've talked the whole night through.
Good morning.
Good morning to you. Good morning. Good morning. It's great to stay up late. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
When the band began to play, the stars were shining bright. Now the milkman's on his way. It's too late to say goodnight. So
Good morning.
good morning. We've talked the whole night through.
Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Morning. Good morning. We've gabbed the whole night through. Good morning. Good morning to you.
Nothing could be grander than to be in Louisiana
In the morning.
Good morning. We've talked the whole night through.
Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Hello, everyone. How are you? And welcome to our return episode of EastLine Insomnia.
Hello, hello, hello. My name's Nicole.
And I'm Dan. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. God, it's been a while. It's been 2 months. We've missed you guys.
I don't think they've missed us, Dan, to be honest with you.
I've missed
They
them.
probably found something better to do with their midnights on Fridays.
Well, I've got nothing else better to do, so here I am with some of my favorite people. That's for damn sure. Hi, everyone. It's been 2 months. The world is falling apart, and here we are talking about one of our favorite queer authors tonight. We're super excited, and thank you for joining us. What have you been up to, Nicole? Ride any big-wheeled bicycles lately?
Why are we always talking about penny farthings?
Okay, because if you need to consider the ridiculousness of this freaking thing. Okay, if you look at pictures, everyone should go Google penny farthings. It is the most ridiculous contraption that has ever existed. There is no way. I disagree that someone built it and thought this is a good idea. This will look stylish. I don't. It was only designed for like elephants and clowns. That is the only purpose of this device. And it bothers me that it was a thing. It bothers me.
Okay.
And I want one for my birthday. I want one for my birthday. I want a big wheel bicycle. Hi, Bridget.
Bridget's here. Hi, Bridget.
Hey, I hope you're doing well. How's the cat? I hope they're doing fine. Anyway, everybody. Welcome back to Insomnia. We've missed you so much. We're going to have some theater news, some big topic discussions, and then we're going to have a great panel for you guys tonight. Some of the cast of The Importance of Being Earnest is joining us tonight, which we're super excited about. But before we get into that, we got to cover the news, don't we, Nicole?
We do, even though there's not much of it anymore. Very little theater news occurring.
Yeah.
You want to take the first one, Dan? First news
Yeah. As we all know, the fabulous invalid is refusing to stand up from her couch. She is very, very relaxed and reclined and in a heavy-induced coma, but this is from Playbill.com. Though Broadway performances will not return for their coronavirus-induced hiatus until at least January of next year, IANTI, the union covering stagehands, front of house workers, hairstylists, makeup artists, wardrobe team members, and other behind-the-scene technicians, has begun to share guidelines for its members and their employers upon reopening. The newly released 27-page document reviewed by medical experts calls for the implementation of various steps for venues, including but not limited to the providing of required PPE, staggering call times, daily screenings, and other requirements. Additional requests affect how audiences interact with the theater as well, including eliminating all backstage tours and post-show stage door greetings, and having theatergoers acquire their own playbills instead of receiving them from ushers. So now you can steal extra programs without feeling guilty about it. The request follows similar calls from Actors Equity.
From the stage, Andrew Lloyd Webber has opened the London Palladium for a test pilot event to see how audiences and workers can be welcomed back to the theater. He says, "Theater is my life, and the one thing I really feel I can do is give something back to the profession that has been so good to me." He revealed to audiences at the socially distanced event the measures that had been taken to improve safety at the venue during the pandemic, as well as audiences having their temperatures taken at the door and specially adapted antiviral door handles. He said the theater had been fogged prior to audiences coming in. The measures, he said, were based on ones used in South Korea, where a production of The Phantom of the Opera has been able to reopen to full audiences without social distancing. They were very much ahead with all the measures, and we were able to adopt all of the measures Korea had. One of them is that this theater was fogged yesterday, and the chemical that it is fogged with is effective against the virus for 4 weeks. But we would do it every fortnight, he said. Pilot event welcomed 640 people compared with the 2,297 people the London Palladium usually holds. This meant it had less than 30% capacity. Front row seats were empty to allow for adequate distance between the performer and the audience, and every other row of seats was marked as unavailable. Audience members were seated with space between them and the next party. Lloyd Webber told the audience that he wanted to see social distancing removed. The Palladium is meant to be full. It's a theater that wants to love you. I think this event will amply prove why social distancing in theater doesn't work. It's a misery for the performers, I know, he said, adding, "If this was a comedy, one of the things you'd like to hear is other people laugh, and if you're miles apart, it's no good, but it's a start." At the event, attended by UK government officials and members of Public Health England, he reiterated his urgent pleas to the government to provide a date for when theatres can open. "My plea to Boris Johnson is, give us a date, mate," he said. Oh, Andrew Webber. He might be rushing things a bit. Might be rushing into it.
Might just a bit, just a tiny bit. In other news, David Byrne's American Utopia, which will air on HBO Max later this year, will have its premiere at the Toronto Film Festival in September. As previously announced, Oscar winner Spike Lee filmed the theatrical concert during the tail end of its Broadway run. American Utopia features songs from Byrne's 2018 album of the same name, along with hits from his Talking Heads frontman time, as well as throughout his solo career. In 2018, the show played engagements in 27 countries and bowed at Boston's Colonial Theater and New York's Hudson Theater the following year. A return engagement was slated to begin in September at the Broadway venue, but now was postponed due to the coronavirus pandemic. Honestly, I'm a little late to the game on the Talking Heads thing, because I actually just today watched Stop Making Sense, which is a documentary filmed concert, and I gotta tell you, the Talking Heads are probably the coolest band I've ever seen in my life. It was a spiritual experience, and I highly recommend anyone to watch it, and I'm really looking forward to finally seeing this. But that's not all. I think we have some online events, don't we, Nicole?
We do. Things have seemed to wind down a little bit as people get to the summer and they're spending more time outside. Especially a lot of free events. There's not as many free events, like the National Theater has ended, the Globe has ended. But Live from Lincoln Center is just kicking into high gear. Their concert production of Carousel, starring Kelly O'Hara, Jesse Mueller, and Nathan Gunn, is currently available for viewing until September 8th at lincolncenter.org through their Lincoln Center at Home program.
Speaking of Rodgers and Hammerstein, segue, the Rodgers and Hammerstein organization continued their Rodgers and Hammerstein movie nights earlier tonight with a showing of the television production of Cinderella starring Julie Andrews. This video will be available on YouTube for 48 hours, though my sources tell me they had some technical difficulties. So
I think they did. They started late. They started late, but I think that they're fully up now, and it's available through Sunday.
So
If you're feeling more dance at the moment, 2 dance pieces of note are currently available online. That's Blues Suite, the first work Alvin Ailey created for the Ailey Company in 1958. A 1985 recording of the piece is available on the Alvin Ailey YouTube channel through July 30th. And the Royal Ballet's production of The Sleeping Beauty is available on the Royal Opera House YouTube channel through August 7th. Oh, look who's up, Dan.
Oh, wow. PJ, it's past your bedtime. Go to bed, PJ. Oh, gosh. Anyway, we have some local stuff going on for you guys. Tuesday, July 28th at 8 p.m., join the Long Island Gay Men's Chorus, whom we adore, for a drag match game fundraiser featuring EastLine favorite Tony Homeperm, whom we love, in their 80s sitcom Cheesecake Edition. Someone will have to attend and let me know what that means. Event live on their Facebook page. You guys should check it out. We here at EastLine love ourselves some singing queers. We, of course, consider them a sister charity. So if you guys could go and give them the same support they give us, we'd be greatly appreciated. They are one of the finest groups I've heard in a while. So,
One other local event going on, Theatre 3 continues their offstage online project. Theatre 3's way of providing new and exciting content during these extremely unusual times, featuring some familiar faces, including friend of the show, Brian Bowie. Check out the latest videos on their Facebook and YouTube channels. But I believe there is something even more local coming up this Sunday night. Is that correct, Dan?
No. Yes, there is. I believe you're gonna have to correct me here if I'm wrong. I believe there's a virtual production of The Importance of Being Earnest being streamed live on YouTube on the EastLine YouTube page on Sunday at 7 p.m. I think
that might be the case.
I'm thinking that's the case. I don't know, but the truth is rarely pure and never simple. And speaking of the importance of being earnest, that segues us into our big topic.
The love that dare not speak its name in this century is such a great affection of an elder for a younger man as there was between David and Jonathan, such as Plato made the very basis of his philosophy, and such as you may find in the sonnets of Michelangelo and Shakespeare. It is in this century misunderstood, so much misunderstood that it may be described as the love that dare not speak its name. And on account of it, I am placed where I am now. It is beautiful. It is fine. It is the noblest form of affection. There is nothing unnatural about it. It is intellectual, and it repeatedly exists between an elder and a younger man. When the elder has intellect, and the younger man has all the joy, hope, and glamour of life before him. That it should be so, the world does not understand. The world mocks at it, and sometimes puts one in the pillory for it.
Our topic of discussion today is the immortal author and dramatist Oscar Wilde.
Yes, Oscar Flangallo Flattery Wills Wilde was born in Dublin to Sir William and Francesca Wilde. Oscar was the second of the couple's three children, though he had three half-siblings from his father's previous relationships.
Oscar's father was an Irish ophthalmologist, as well as an author of significant works on medicine, archaeology, and notably folklore, particularly concerning his native Ireland, which would influence his son's later work. He ran his own hospital, St. Mark's Ophthalmic Hospital for Diseases of the Eye and Ear in Dublin, and was appointed to serve as an oculist in ordinary to Queen Victoria.
Oscar's mother was a poet in her own right, writing under a pen name, Speranza, and she was an early advocate of women's rights and campaigned for better education of women. Actually, what's really interesting about her is that she would often hold salons with famous suffragettes of the times, one of which being Melissa St. Fawcett, which is fantastic to me, that she would have her friends come and listen to her and, you know, give money to the cause and consider the cause. You know, she was very vocal about her opinions.
I think that it's funny that the circle was so small in London around the turn of the century in like the 1880s. Just everybody knew everybody, like all of your faves, like George Bernard Shaw, like the Pankhursts, like they all knew each other. They were all having the same tea.
What's interesting is that actually Oscar Wilde's father was a personal physician to George Bernard Shaw's father. Like that's how close it gets. It's really weird.
George Bernard Shaw. Wait, George Bernard Shaw? Yeah, George Bernard. No, Bram Stoker's. Bram Stoker's wife dated Oscar Wilde.
Left Oscar Wilde for him.
Guys. There were not that many people in London at the time. Anyway, until he was 9, Oscar Wilde was educated at home, where he was taught by a French nursemaid and a German governess.
With a Royal Scholarship to read classics, Wilde attended Trinity College in Dublin from 1871 to 1874, sharing rooms with his older brother, Willie Wilde, the man with the most unfortunate name. Trinity. Willie Wilde. Pew, 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 pew. Now I lost my place. Trinity was one of the leading classical schools, and Wilde established himself as an outstanding student. In his finals, he won the Berkeley Gold Medal in Greek, the university's highest academic award.
At Magdalen College, Oxford, he read greats from 1874 to 1878. While at Magdalen, Wilde became particularly well known for his role in the aesthetic and decadent movements. He wore his hair long, openly scorned manly sports, though he occasionally boxed, and he decorated his rooms with peacock feathers, lilies, sunflowers, blue china, and other objects to art. He once remarked to friends whom he entertained lavishly, "I find it harder and harder every day to live up to my blue china."
Oh, God. What a diva. Upon graduating from Oxford, Wilde moved to London to live with his friend, Frank Mills, a popular portraitist among London's high society. There he continued to focus on writing poetry, publishing his first collection, titled Poems, in 1881. While the book received only modest critical praise, it nevertheless established Wilde as an up-and-coming writer. The next year, in 1882, Wilde traveled from London to New York City to embark on an American lecture tour, for which he delivered a staggering 140 lectures in just 9 months.
So there's a bunch of pictures on this slide, but I want to draw particular attention to there's a painting in the sort of middle of the slide there, which is actually Oscar Wilde. You can see him in the short yellow pants. This is assumed to be a painting of Oscar Wilde on the beach at Long Beach, Long Island. Upon the conclusion of his American tour, Wilde returned home and immediately commenced another lecture circuit of England and Ireland that lasted until the middle of 1884. Through his lectures as well as his early poetry, Wilde established himself as a leading proponent of the aesthetic movement, a theory of art and literature that emphasized the pursuit of beauty for its own sake, rather than to promote any political or social viewpoint.
In London, he was introduced in 1881 to Constance Lloyd, daughter of a wealthy Queen's Consul. She happened to be visiting Dublin in 1884 when Wilde was lecturing at the Gaiety Theatre. He proposed to her and they married on the 29th of May that same year. The couple had 2 sons together, Cyril and Vivian.
There's a bunch of photos on this slide, actually, but I want to draw, again, particular attention to a photo on the right, which was taken by a portraitist in New York called Cerrone, who took a bunch of portraits like this one, one of the most famous pictures of Oscar Wilde, that were posed in the lavish manner, and you'll see he's dressed in a sort of odd way. This is not really how Victorians dressed. This was how Oscar Wilde dressed, in those sort of the velvet jacket, the short velvet pants, the knee-high socks. This was a very Oscar Wilde outfit, and a lot of the portraits taken by Cerrone in New York were in this more flamboyant style of dress. There's a famous one where he wears a cape. And this was how the style he wanted to present to the world. I also want to draw particular attention to a photo on the bottom center, which is a photo of Robbie Ross. Who is he, Dan?
Robert Ross was Wilde's first male lover and was a fan of Wilde before they met. Having read Wilde's poems at Oxford, Ross seemed unrestrained by the Victorian prohibition against homosexuality and became estranged from his family. They met at Oxford in 1884.
According to Daniel Mendelsohn, Wilde, who had long alluded to Greek love, was initiated into homosexual sex by Ross, while his marriage had begun to unravel after his wife's second pregnancy, which left him physically repelled. It is believed that his sexual awakening was a large inspiration for his first and only novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray.
I was found.
Found?
The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an old gentleman of a very charitable and kindly disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing because he happened to have a first-class ticket for Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It is a seaside resort.
And where did this charitable gentleman with a first-class ticket for the seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I was in a handbag. Somewhat large, black leather handbag with handles to it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given him in mistake for his own.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station?
Yes. The Brighton line.
The line is immaterial.
The first version of The Picture of Dorian Gray was published as the lead story in the July 1890 edition of Lippincott's Monthly Magazine, among with 5 others. Reviewers immediately criticized the novel's decadence and homosexual allusions. The Daily Chronicle, for example, called it, quote, unclean, poisonous, and heavy with the odors and moral and spiritual putrefaction. Wilde vigorously responded, writing to the editor of the Scots Observer, in which he clarified his stance on ethics and aesthetics in art, quote, if a work of art is rich and vital and complete, those who have artistic instincts will see its beauty, and those whom seem ethics appeal more strongly will see its moral lesson. He nevertheless revised it extensively for book publication in 1891.
Oscar followed up his novel with an explosion into the theater scene. From 1891 to 1895, Wilde would produce 5 plays, 4 of which would be big successes in London. His first and most controversial play, Salome, was originally written in French, and while it would ultimately be published in English, it would never be produced in England in his lifetime due to the censorship of biblical depictions on British stages.
Wilde's second play, Lady Windermere's Fan, opened in February 1892 to widespread popularity and critical acclaim, encouraging Wilde to adopt playwriting as his primary literary form. Over the next few years, Wilde produced several great plays, witty, highly satirical comedies of manners that nevertheless contained dark and serious undertones. A Woman of No Importance in 1893, An Ideal Husband in 1895, and in 1895 as well, The Importance of Being Earnest, his most famous play.
Which I featured quite heavily in the photos here. You'll see a photo in the bottom right is Sir George Alexander and Lady Bracknell in the original London production of The Importance of Being Earnest. A few more of the cigarette case scene in the middle, and of course Cecily and Gwendolen comforting each other on the top there. That's a program from the original production, as well as a manuscript for the first publication of it, which is held in the Harry Ransom archives. Speaking
of archives, this is a review of the original production by William Archer of The World from the 20th of February, 1895. The Importance of Being Earnest, which imitates nothing, represents nothing, is nothing, except a sort of rondo capriccio in which the artist's fingers run with crisp irresponsibility up and down the piano of life. Why attempt to analyze and class such a play? Its themes, in other hands, would have made a capital farce. But farce is far too gross and commonplace a word to apply to such an iridescent filament of fantasy. Incidences of the same nature as Algy Moncrief's Bunburying and John Worthy's invention and subsequent suppression of the scapegoat brother Ernest have done duty in many a French vaudeville and English adaptation. But Mr. Wilde's humor transmutes them into something entirely new and individual. Amid so much that is negative, however, criticism may find one positive remark to make. Behind all Mr. Wilde's whims and even perversity, there lurks a genuine science, or perhaps I should say instinct, of the theatre.
In Reading Jail by Reading Town, there is a pit of shame, and in it lies a wretched man, eaten by teeth of flame. In a burning, winding sheet he lies, and his grave has got no name. And there, till Christ call forth the dead, in silence let him lie. No need to waste a foolish tear, or heave the windy sigh. The man had killed the thing he loved, and so he had to die. And all men kill the thing they love. By all let this be heard. Some do it with a bitter look, some with a flattering word. The coward does it with a kiss. The brave man with a sword. In Reading Jail by Reading Town, there is a pit of shame, and in it lies a wretched man, eaten by teeth of flame. In a burning, winding sheet he lies, and his grave has got no name. And there Christ called forth the dead, in silence let him lie. No need to waste a foolish tear, or heave the windy sigh. The man had killed the thing he loved, and so he had to die. And all men kill the thing they love. By all let this be heard. Some do it with a bitter look, some with a flattering word. The coward does it with a kiss. the brave man with a sword.
Oops.
Bit of a technical issue there, obviously.
Sorry about that.
No worries. Around the same time that he was enjoying his greatest literary success, Wilde commenced an affair with a young man named Lord Alfred Douglas that he called Bosie. The couple is pictured at the top center in this sepia photo there. On February 18th, 1895, 4 days after the opening of The Importance of Being Earnest in London, Douglas's father, the Marquis of Queensberry, who had gotten wind of the affair, left a calling card at Wilde's home addressed to Oscar Wilde, posing sodomite, a misspelling of sodomite. Although Wilde's homosexuality was something of an open secret, he was so outraged by Queensberry's note that he sued him for libel. The decision would ruin his life.
When the trial began in March, Queensberry and his lawyers presented evidence of Wilde's homosexuality, homoerotic passages from his literary works, as well as love letters to Douglas. That quickly resulted in the dismissal of Wilde's libel case and his arrest on charges of gross indecency. Wilde was convicted on May 25th, 1895, and sentenced to 2 years in prison with hard labor.
You can see on the top right there the jail cell that he lived in for those 2 years at Reading Jail. Between January and March 1897, while incarcerated in that cell, Wilde wrote a 50,000-word letter to Douglas. In it, Wilde coldly examines his career to date, how he had been a colorful agent provocateur in Victorian society as well as his own art. Wilde blamed himself, though, for the ethical degradation of character that he allowed Douglas to bring about in him and took responsibility for his own fault. On his release, he gave the manuscript to Robbie Ross. The letter was partially published in 1905 as De Profundis.
Wilde emerged from prison in 1897, physically depleted, emotionally exhausted, and flat broke. His wife left him, taking the children to Europe, eventually changing their last names. She would refuse to meet Wilde or allow him to see their sons, though she regularly would send him money. She died in 1898.
Pictured on the bottom right there is the last meeting between Bosie and Oscar Wilde in 1897 in Naples.
Wilde went into exile in France, where he would spend his last 3 years impoverished. Wilde did little writing in his later years. Most notably, Wilde spent the middle of 1897 with Robbie Ross in a seaside village in northern France, where he wrote the Ballad of Reading Jail, narrating the execution of Charles Thomas Wooldridge, who arrived at Reading Jail 5 months after Wilde. Drawing from his personal experiences, it moves from objective storytelling to symbolic identification with the prisoners. It would be his final work.
Wilde's final address was at the dingy Hotel d'Alsace. He wandered the boulevards alone and spent what little money he had on alcohol. Soon Wilde was sufficiently confined to his hotel. He joked on one of his final trips outside, "My wallpaper and I are fighting a duel to the death. One of us has got to go." Wilde died of meningitis on the 30th of November 1900 at the age of 46. He is pictured on his deathbed at the bottom center there in a photo taken by Maurice Guibert.
In 1909, Wilde's remains were disinterred and transferred to Père Lachaise Cemetery. His sphinx-like tomb there was designed by Jacob Epstein. Today, the monument is viewed by thousands of visitors every year, a tradition developed whereby visitors would kiss the tomb after applying lipstick to their mouth, thereby leaving a print of their kiss, which I did when I was in Paris. It's probably one of the most moving things you'll ever see in your life. It's just these people, you know, giving their little kind of love to this man, their admiration to this man. People did it so much that they actually had to put a barrier around it. So when I was there was a barrier around it, and people would kiss the barrier. But in my sneaky ways that I will not disclose, I was able to actually get one on the monument. But I don't want the French authorities to come after me.
Glad you didn't get deported, Dan.
Deported back to my country? Is that how that works? Just one
Yes.
The epitaph on it is a verse from the Ballad of Reading Jail. "And alien tears will fill for him pity's long broken urn, for his mourners will be outcast men, and outcasts always mourn."
On the streets of Rome, 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 on the streets of
In the 120 years since Oscar Wilde died, his reputation has undergone as many revolutions as those he experienced during his lifetime. Despite being almost totally ignored in Britain in the years following his death, the causes of his downfall meant that he was a highly controversial figure. He was feted in countries as varied as France, the US, and Russia. Even in Britain, his plays remained popular. Wilde's profile was boosted in 1908 by the publication of a collected 14-volume edition of his works by his friend and former lover, Robbie Ross.
From the 1960s onward, his work was increasingly seen in a fresh light, interpreted as a serious author worthy of universal study. Following the decriminalization of homosexuality in Britain in 1965, Wilde became an icon for a new generation, passionate about sexual freedom and civil liberties. In 2017, Wilde was among an estimated 500,000 men who were pardoned for homosexual acts that were no longer considered offenses. One of the people including that as Alan Turing. 2017 for me is too little too late. So.
But Oscar Wilde has had a grand life beyond his works even. So the two mentioned before is at the top left, as well as a statue of Oscar Wilde that is in the park in Dublin across from his birthplace. And I just threw this one in there. It's the top center is a picture of Oscar Wilde himself in drag as his character Salome. And the rest are, I wanted to demonstrate the great breadth of things that have come from Oscar Wilde himself. Where should I start? Okay, so Ernest on the bottom left. That's I'm sure some of you may have seen this Broadway production of The Importance of Being Earnest with Brian Bedford in drag as Lady Bracknell. But otherwise, there is a musical production of Ernest called Ernest in Love, which is the poster on the top right there. This is being performed at the Takarazuka Review in Japan, which is an all-female production. So Ernest has undergone many different treatments. Man of No Importance, musical by Aarons Flaherty and McNally, one of my personal favorites. We've been playing some clips from the show, but based on the film of the same name about a man who finds himself through the works of Oscar Wilde in 1960s Ireland. Also a bookstore, the Oscar Wilde Memorial Bookshop was a queer bookstore in New York for 50 years almost. Gross Indecency, which I'm sure you're familiar with, Dan, right?
Obviously. That show nearly killed me. And Matt Rosenberg.
Popular Moises Kaufman play that features the actual transcripts from the trials of Oscar Wilde. And then one I just threw in recently, closed in New York, Oscar at the Crown, which is an immersive dystopian nightclub musical set in the future where only the works of Oscar Wilde have survived. So I think that his legacy has been broad and unique and queer, and he is sort of the granddaddy of camp, I feel.
Yeah. Well, I do think it's almost I think it's in many things. One, I think it's part like homaging and sort of respect towards our elders, towards our ancestors in a way. I also think because he was the first, because he found himself and was unapologetic about it, even to the final trial, that clip that let us in, that testimony he made, where he made that very clear, it was in Oscar Wilde's way because he was, that's the kind of guy he was. But it was very clear what he was saying and what he was trying to support, and to stand up in an English court in his time when he knew, by the way, that these people are going to hang him out to dry, and to stand for himself. I think people sort of respect that. The disenfranchised look up to it and they want to honor it, because he did blaze the path forward. And I think because of Oscar Wilde, we see this wonderful breadth of work, because people want to continue to keep his sort of fabulousness alive.
Definitely.
To close us off here, we're going to have the final passages of De Profundis, which is going to lead us into our wonderful roundtable discussion with our cast of The Importance of Being Earnest, where we'll talk more about camp and the themes found in Oscar Wilde's plays. But I just want to say that in the end of his life, and in the clip you'll see, Oscar Wilde seemed to not see a place for himself in the world. But I think his legacy demonstrates that the annals of history have embraced him and have accepted all of his wonderful quirks. Here's Patti Smith reading the ending passages of De Profundis.
Society, as we have constituted it, will have no place for me, has none to offer. But nature, whose sweet rains fall on unjust and just alike, will have clefts in the rocks where I may hide, and secret valleys in whose silence I may weep undisturbed. She will hang the night with stars, so that I may walk abroad in the darkness without stumbling, and send the wind over my footprints, so that none may track me to my hurt. She will cleanse me in great waters, and with bitter herbs make me whole.
Where I'll fall soon must follow. Around her grave I've wandered drear, in night and morning early, with breaking heart when near I hear the wind shakes the barley.
Van Bring is known to loosen the moral tone. A marvelous friend to own is Mr. Van Bring. When cities have lost their charm and invalid friends alarm, calls me to a Shropshire farm to Mr. Van Bring, where the girls are sweet and country bred and slightly overfed, but easily misled. Still it's wise to have an arm de plume, so when you've done you can't be chased and can't be traced for what you may have done to whom. One brings a lark, especially after dark, why even the skies cloud.
Special guests! Woohoo! Joining us now to hopefully lighten the mood a bit. Joining us now in the studio are several of the cast members of our virtual production of The Importance of Being Earnest.
Woohoo! He is a New York City-based actor and enjoys pineapple and bacon on his pizza, playing the incorrigible Algernon in our production, and it is way past his bedtime. Here's Adobe Wale Adebi. Are you there, Wale?
She is a Long Island-based actor and a general maker of art and mischief. She brings Jack to life in this Sunday and is our first official return guest. Elena Faverio is here.
Oh my gosh. Good morning. I'm honored.
He is a Long Island-based actor and playwright and the unofficial gay heartthrob of Nassau County. He plays the precocious Cecily. William Muir is here.
Good evening, lovelies.
Simply asleep.
She is a performer, director, choreographer, teacher, and bead flower artist, as well as EastLine's resident beach diva. She plays Miss Prism in our production. The iconic Rosemary Kurtz has graced us with her presence.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Ro. So thanks, everybody, for staying up late with us. I know some of you are early to bed people. So thanks for staying up past your bedtime. Just want to remind our listeners that The Importance of Being Earnest is Sunday night at 7 p.m. And you can ask questions about members of our cast if you like. Leave a comment down below, and we will discuss your questions live and in person. But to get things started, I thought we could start by talking about the show, obviously. Were you familiar with The Importance of Being Earnest beforehand?
I read The Importance of Being Earnest my freshman year of college. I was in a costume design class, and the final project was we actually had to design the show. And I remember it was one of the first plays with heightened text I read on my own. And I was just trying to get through it because Oscar Wilde, I love him, but he uses so much in a single passage that I didn't even realize at first it was a comedy. But now, it took me having to watch the play, and I'm like, oh, I get it now. But since then, I adore the play. It's perfectly fabulous.
I had not, I think I had seen it once a long time ago, so it was really fresh material when we started reading it and rehearsing it.
Yeah, I think for me, I remember my freshman year of college, my dorm all got really drunk and we watched the movie version with like Reese Witherspoon and Colin Firth. That was my only and first introduction to Oscar Wilde, I guess, before doing this play now.
Mm-hmm. So this is the first time you've been in an Oscar Wilde. Has anybody been in an Oscar Wilde play before?
Not me. No.
This is my first
No?
Wilde. And let me just say, it's been a wild time.
I have to say this is.
No.
I mean, this is most frequently produced, so not really a surprise. Is it what you expected?
I didn't know that I really had any expectations. I did expect it to be quite British, so it certainly filled that expectation. But as for plot and who's who and who does what to who, I really didn't have any expectations.
I think it's funny because we're in a moment right now where there's basically like no expectations for any sorts of theater and arts because we're in such a different playing field already with quarantine and doing Zoom plays and being on YouTube or where we are now, StreamYard, that a lot of it has already been shifted. And then it's the whole question of how do you do this physical, farcy, over-the-top play and then also accommodate the need to be virtual and the need to, you know, be online. It's been really interesting and really fun.
So how is working virtually for each of you?
For me, it hasn't been too jarring because I have worked virtually before. Back in March, I was part of a show called Two Solid Flesh, which was an amalgamation of a bunch of different Shakespeare's plays, but it was written to be performed via Zoom and be interactive. And while it's kind of freeing in a way in that I don't have like that pressure of like 1,000 eyes on me, at least in person, that I would in a live theater. But it kind of sucks in that you kind of lose that intimacy or even just like that feeling of the first day of rehearsal. You don't get to connect with people and feel their energies in the rehearsal room.
Yeah, I agree. You don't know until you don't know what you have until you lose it. And it's absolutely true with theater too. I mean, now we don't have the having to eat dinner quickly and go to rehearsal and being in the room and getting your coffee and, you know, sitting around the table and all that kind of stuff and working through the process. Now we're home and we get on our computer and we're still home. And as soon as we hang up, we're still home. Mm-hmm. So lose an awful lot of the fun part of it. But the actual meat of analyzing your character and figuring out how they relate to the other characters, that is still pretty much the same. And it is still fun. It's just that you miss all the goodies that come along with it.
Although I will say, for me personally, this is the first thing I'm doing during quarantine that is live. We're actually going to do it live. And that has been sort of a step back towards doing something that is a bit more, you know, direct and community oriented. And there's going to be like a live audience watching us do it in the moment, as well as, I guess, after, once it's posted as a video. So that's been really fun to get that feeling back.
Do you find, because this is a comedy, do you find that is, and there is no audience that you can hear anyway, do you find this is a positive, a negative?
For me, it's definitely a little tricky because, like, especially with comedy, you do kind of rely on the audience energy to like feel like how are they receiving it, seeing what lands. But at the same time, for me, I'm kind of enjoying the fact that it kind of forces me to pay more attention to my scene partner, especially when I'm working with Wale. Like, because I feel like sometimes when you're in a live theater, there's pressure to like, oh, the audience is enjoying this, let's really camp it up. But it kind of forces me like, this is my partner, this is what they're giving me, and just feed off that. It makes it feel a little more organic.
I know what you mean. And for me, delivering a line to the camera, which is a pinprick little spot in the top of my laptop, that's a whole different experience. And not having the audience there does change things a little, but it's a different energy. It's not better and not worse.
Yeah, I think we're probably going to talk a bit more later about, our individual experiences with characters. But in terms of the comedy of playing Jack, there is something about being without the audience that is sort of helpful in terms of how I've been approaching him, because I think he's the kind of character who just is funny, but is not aware. I know there are lots of Wilde characters who are so clever and so aware of how funny they are. And I think Jack isn't like that. He just kind of is funny because he's kind of blundering and goes straight for stuff and is a bit ridiculous. So I think not having the feedback of the humor in some ways helps with the portrayal in a weird way. So that's been interesting to discover.
So if Jack is the straight one, I think, Wale, you've been having some technical troubles. Have you been able to join us now?
No, Wale.
Hi.
No, Wale, my husband.
Poor Wale. We forced him to stay up after his bedtime, and it's not working for him. I feel so bad.
Oh, I'm sorry, Wale. He's probably talking into the void right now.
Y'all hear me?
Well, there you are. Oh my God.
Hello.
Hello, Wale.
Oh, okay. Wow. My bad.
No. Very Algernon of you, to be honest.
I've been here the whole time, but like it's not been working until now.
No worries, no worries. How are you enjoying playing
Ooh. How we doing?
How are you enjoying playing Algernon, Wale? Maybe it's just me that Wale can't hear.
Hey, Wale.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I guess it's just you, Nicole.
Maybe it's just
Nicole.
me.
Nicole was just asking how was it like to play Algernon?
Oh, playing Algernon. Definitely like an internal rhythm that it's funny, like this whole pandemic that we're in, like the times that we're in, and what Rose said before about us having to be inside, and I guess just sort of like playing Algernon and like trying to find the fun in that, like all while like being confined, because like he's confined by his like his debts and like things like that. He's always trying to find ways to find fun. So it's been really fun, like a lot of levity.
Well, do you think that while Jesus Christ, that Algernon, it's late for me too, that Algernon sort of kind of makes levity of everything to avoid his troubles? Do you think that's sort of the direction that you're taking him?
Most definitely, because when we get to the romance part with Cecily and Algernon, I was like noticing. I was like, oh, he's the way he's reacting, and like also like Wilde. I mean, I'm fairly new to Wilde, but I mean this play is it's very amazing, very amazing. It's amazing. I like the music it has. It's very it's readily available. I think like Wilde gives it to you, and I noticed like with Cecily and Algernon, I was like, okay, so when these back and forths are happening, Algernon perhaps is a person that can take offense, regardless of who it may be, because like there is like I guess this insecurity that like makes him well-rounded, but the fact that he's musically inclined, he's very smart, he's like he's like a social engineer of sorts. You know what I mean?
Well, how do you find, speaking of social, how do you find sort of the fact that we've made the role clearly gay, which is not usually the thing that one does, especially not in the times of Wilde. How do you feel that Algernon's sexuality sort of plays into everything?
I think it definitely is reflecting the time. In the sense that I guess Algernon in 2020, if he were that same guy, but just for the new standards of 2020, it's not really like unfathomable. Like younger generation. I think I don't know like what happened. I guess like before we came about, but I feel like the way we're sort of like socially interacting, like
Yeah.
sexually like interacting, like this is the kind of shit that we do. Like it's not far fetched at all. It's like with Algernon, he seeks pleasure in life. Period.
Woo, I
At
like
the end of the
that.
day, that's it. So like him,
And he doesn't care
sort
what
of
his pleasure's
playing,
like.
he cares how he receives it.
Interesting.
Like he likes cucumber sandwiches. You know what I'm saying? Cucumbers, it's a certain kind of fruit. You know what I mean? Certain kind of like this is weird, but like density. Like it's like a certain kind of like it's a nice sandwich. It makes sense. Like
He's
everything
particular.
about it. It's very particular. So
And now, on the other end of that spectrum, Billy, how do you find that playing Cecil, who is usually played by a woman? So how have you found yourselves sort of, because you're kind of building a new dynamic here, this gay couple, which is not usually the case. How do you find that process has been for you, William?
Well, it's honestly been very fun just overall. Like playing Cecily, it doesn't feel like I doesn't feel like I really have to try too much. I mean, like I'm doing the work, but it's just a lot of fun because I feel like I'm playing a very heightened version of myself. And also what I love is, especially with the gender switch, like I feel it kind of gives Cecily a lot more freedom to be a lot more outward than she normally is allowed to be in the play, because there's these expectations of how a woman is supposed to behave in front of a man in that time period. Whereas I feel like, because we're already giving permission for homosexuality to exist publicly in this play, that we're even allowed to play up the more playful nature of the play. Like one of my favorite scenes to perform with Wale is the moment I first meet Algernon, and just going through the subtext is so flirtatious and so kind of sexy, and like it's just so much fun getting to play with that. And I feel like especially the inclusion of a male on male relationship kind of gives us that freedom to explore that a lot more than I think a traditional production would.
How about you, Elena? How do you find playing Jack as a woman and having a same-sex relationship with Nicole, actually, of all people?
Well, I mean, anyone who has seen my most recent work at EastLine will know that this is not my first time playing a character that is traditionally cast as a male-identifying actor. And for me, I think I've spoken about this before. It's not so much for me a question in my process of, oh, this character is a gendered male, so I'm going to play them a certain way, or I'm not going to play them a certain way. But I thought what Billy said is really interesting, is that historically, and I think currently, there are, I think, limitations put on performances either internally or externally because a character is gendered a certain way. And that can be done by the actor, by the director, by the culture of the room, by the way a piece is set, or by the way a character is costumed. So I think something that is really interesting about this process for me is that we're all kind of doing our own thing, creating our own characters, and just like Billy said, bringing ourselves. So for me, it's really been like Billy said as well. I'm just saying Billy's right, essentially. A real sort of process of how can I bring the aspects of Elena to Jack? Where do I overlap with this person? And finding out that actually this character that initially when you said, will you play this part? I was like, oh, I don't know what I'll do with that. Finding out that there's a lot more overlap than I suspected, and I've enjoyed it. I found it, like Billy said again, quite freeing.
Well, let me now open this up to the larger conversation for everyone here. So, the sort of essence of Importance of Being Earnest, I find, is that Wilde is trying to make commentary about the social norms. He's satirical against social normality, and the way we accept and talk about things and consider things. I mean, one of the things that Nicole and I talked about was the fact that the show is a little bit aromantic in the sense that everyone has to be informed on how to have a romance in the piece. And I was wondering that, and this is for anyone who wants to bite at it here, is how do we feel that adding queerness to it, overt queerness, open queerness, affects that social message? Like, what do we feel it says? Nobody.
Don't everyone jump at once.
Everyone's stumped.
It just touches on the awareness in society now that there aren't just the traditional ways of having relationships. There are other ways of feeling and other ways of relating to other people.
Yeah, and kind of in a similar vein before, it's getting an opportunity to tell stories and look at them through a different perspective. Like, one of the things I said earlier is that Wilde, he uses language almost excessively in his work. But one of the fun things I've loved about the gender switch is that it's kind of allowed me to look at the text in a different light. And there's one line I have towards the end of the play, right after we find out, like, me and Gwendolyn find the ruse has been lifted and there really is no Ernest. And I'm paraphrasing, but it's like, it's not a good position for a young girl to find herself, is it? And that has a whole different connotation when it's said from a man. And I was like, oh, that's a joke because I wouldn't know. I'm playing Cecily as a man.
Yeah.
And so it kind of gives us a chance to allow queer people today to share stories that they would not have had the opportunity to share even 10 years ago.
Yeah, Billy, I just listening to you speak then, I was thinking about, how Danny and Nicole have given us all this information on Wilde's life and his works. And it's always so interesting to think about playwrights being a product of their time. And then what would this person have who was like such a prolific and, as you were saying, brave and outspoken individual for the time he was living in and writing in? If he was here in 2020, what would this play look like if he wrote it now? What would the pairings be? What would the characters do? What would Wilde have to say now? What sorts of things would he be writing? I've been thinking about that a lot as I've been listening to the podcast tonight, because I mean, his words are just amazing and beautiful. And just to think if it was a time when he could really be open with his dramatic work, what sorts of things he'd be able to create.
Having a lot of technical difficulties today, folks.
I thought I'd rendered you speechless with my comment.
No, we're just having some technical difficulties tonight. It's what it is.
But that,
live theater.
That is hello. That is a good point you raised. Like, especially like even with the history we were just hearing about, like, I would love to be able to read like what Wilde's original intent with Dorian Gray was before he had to go back and censor it. Like, it's kind of interesting to think of like these shows in this perspective of like what they could have done in their time. Like, I remember the first time I played a queer character on stage, it was in a production of Machinal, which was written in the 30s. And it was a very, oh God, I'm blanking on the term, but it was in a style of theater where everything was very odd and very mechanical. Expressionist, that's the word I'm thinking of. And the character did not have a name. I was just called Man at Bar. And the character was written, it was a 40-year-old man flirting with a kid who was like maybe 18 in a speakeasy. And even the language that he was given was kind of demonstrative. And like, it's kind of sad that that's what queer people were portrayed as in the 40s. So it's kind of interesting now to see queer people taking the reins of those stories and
especially a story that is at its heart queer. The Oscar Wilde's Bunburying, and there are queer elements to the play that are undeniable, and so we are hopefully bringing those out in this production. Would you agree?
Amen.
So, just one final thought here before we sort of wrap things up. One of the things that I think is clear in Importance of Being Earnest is the sort of the satirical nature of it, and there is a certain rhythm and comedy that comes with that. And one of the things that I'd like to touch on real quickly, and I'm going to shoot this over to Wale if he can hear me, is how you feel the rhythm is affected through a virtual experience, to have to do it through a camera rather than on stage to feed off of it. Do you feel that? And we lost Wale. So anyone can take this now. How we feel a virtual experience sort of affects the way that the satire flows. Does anyone want to jump at that?
Well, we can't pop in through a door the way you could on stage, or slam a door as you leave, anything like that. So it's more an acting thing. You have to portray it through your expression, or do a physical lean in as the camera comes on, something along those lines. But what's important for me to do is watch when my picture is grayed out and when I actually appear, so I know when to start doing the line. And that can affect timing. So it's just it's a different machine than doing a show on a stage, walking in and out and having all that we know so well. So it's a learning experience, and it does flow well when you've got people who are attentive to all the new wrinkles.
Do we feel that doing this play virtually and then to do it on stage live, say we take the same production and do it live, do you feel that would affect your character and the way you're portraying them? Anyone?
Oh, yeah. For me, definitely. I think sort of to talk about both things you've asked briefly, is that I think as we do it with the camera, there's this sort of secondary track running in my head that is sort of keeping little notes of what I would be doing if I were in a physical space, or sort of the scale. I remember we talked about the bit with the cigarette case, which you spoke about earlier in the podcast, where Aldi's got Jack's cigarette case and they're sort of running around the sofa together. And so things like that, I'm constantly sort of imagining myself doing them, but then also to sort of piggyback off what Ro was saying, using the camera, this little green dot that she was referencing, as the frame of play, and sort of the camera becomes another character and another springboard into hilarity and fun. You can really play within this little box, which is something that I've been sort of delighted to discover. There is a lot of fun to be had in how you enter a frame, how you exit a frame, what you're doing with your eye line, what you're doing with little visual gags with props and costumes. So I've been enjoying that learning curve too, to touch on another learning curve that's been adding to the fun.
True. And kind of jumping back to a point I made earlier, one of the things I actually kind of found as a benefit of doing digital theater since the pandemic kind of took away live theater was it's kind of forced me to go back to basics in learning to pay attention to my partner in a scene, because that's really all I have right now. Is I have my screen and I have just the face of my partner and what they're saying to me. And legit, one of the first things I learned when I went to school for acting was make eye contact and just pay attention to your partner. And this kind of forced setup is actually really beneficial in that I have no choice, because I get nothing unless it's from my partner.
So, unfortunately, I don't know if we have Wale again. I don't know. Is Wale there?
I'm here.
Hey!
Oh my God.
Well, you know what? You're going to get the final question. Okay. I had just asked everyone how they feel that it went, having to do the show virtually, since the show is a satire and has a certain rhythm to it, which is something you had said as well, how you feel doing it through a computer as opposed to doing it on stage has affected your performance, and if you feel like doing it live would make how you are portraying the character any differently.
Doing it over video, it's made it like a little bit, I guess, like more important as to like why it's important to listen, like when in a scene, and how like that just does a lot because, like for example, there was one thing that you were talking about that Billy and I did the last run. I'm not gonna say it because we'll see the show, but that only happened like that little exchange when Algernon was not in such a good place, but was wanting to get back, into a position of leverage. I sort of, did the same thing as Billy, and it only happened because I was, I think for the first time, I noticed, oh, like that's what he's saying. So that's helped out a lot because, I do like being in person, making eye contact, and just like breathing with people. And I think every actor has like their way in, so to speak. Some language or movement or whatever it may be. I favor being in person, but since that's not like available, then the listen has to be there for me. And if I was there in person, the main difference, well, I think Algernon has like in his own way, and especially like relating back to what you said before about Wilde, making fun of like certain people, thinking about like a hierarchy in society. You know what I mean? He was sort of looking in depth at certain people. So with that being said, with the way Algernon is, especially like one of his first quotes, which helped out a lot, keeping science for life. I feel like it's sort of like a game, altogether. Like it's a game, like from top to bottom, and what I mean by that is that like the way I think he lives life, the way he sees it is like, oh, I can just make shit up as I go, because I can make sense of it, and I'm well bred, I have experience, I've seen certain things, so I can always like maneuver, so I can be in like a place of advantage.
Yeah.
And I think on stage, there's something sort of like light to that, something sort of carefree, because like what matters to most people, especially people like in I guess like in my class in society, Algernon, they don't necessarily matter to me, but I know how to work both ends because I come from this area. Like I don't like Gwendolyn and Augusta, but we're the same kind of people, so I've got to know how to deal with that, but also how to like, sort of just like gain pleasure in like several different ways.
Well, we're gonna have to let that be the last
person word. It would be, it would be light.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, we're going to have to let that be our last word. We want to thank our guests, Elena, Billy, and Ro. We want to half thank Wale because he's only here half the time. But we appreciate you all for coming out. And you guys can catch their work this Sunday at 7 p.m. on our YouTube channel in The Importance of Being Earnest. Thanks for coming out, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, Annie.
A week and a half, the head, the feels, the night, the day, the sense, I feel. A week and a half from now, this will be
And we've just got a few more things to talk to you about before we wind things up for the evening, as it's already gone 1 o'clock and we're running late today. But we didn't want to miss out our read of the week, which this week was Faustus, That Damned Woman by Chris Bush. Did you like it, Dan?
Are you kidding? Are you kidding? This might have been one of the most exhilarating reads that I've had in, I would have to say, a while. The last time I think I read a play that this play physically made me stand up from my chair at the end of it. Like I think I yelled. It was like theater is, I think, supposed to be cathartic, you know, and that naturally you want to like scream, you want to cry. This play did that for me 110%.
Oh, so a real quick summary of the show. So it's based on Christopher Marlowe's Dr. Faustus, but this obviously is a telling that has a woman as the main character. It's about a woman, Faustus herself, who makes a deal with the devil. And the deal with the devil involves she has the devil's assistant Mephistopheles with her, and basically she agrees to live for 144 years, and you get to see how that works out for her. Sorry, what were you gonna say, Dan?
I was gonna say, what did you think of it?
it was part of the Nick Hearn book club, so I read it first, and I was like, I read the first page, and I was like, oh crap, I gotta read this one with Dan, but Dan was asleep because it was like 3 a.m. So I read it myself alone, aloud. At some point, you just, oh my god, you just gotta stand up, you gotta read it aloud, because it takes her a little while to summon the devil, and the scene where she summons the devil is delicious. I highly recommend. But the way that the play plays with time, and so it starts in the 1600s, like the original Dr. Faustus tale. But Faustus herself is able to travel through time to only forward, not backward, but to some extent. And the way that Chris Bush glances off particular moments in history, maybe when, so obviously Faustus herself causes some bad juju to happen. But the way she glances off historical events and glances off the way women throughout history are treated, and eventually the play ends in the future, and the extent to which Faustus is constantly running until she realizes you can't run from the devil. So yes, I loved it.
We highly recommend you guys read this one. I promise you, this will be one of the. It is. I'm going to say this. It was a life-changing play for me. It really made me really think about the form and the medium and what can be done and what can be said and how you can say it, you know, because there is a sort of pervasive theme about women in society, and you don't realize that's the story you're watching until they decide to show it to you. And that's just in the way it's written. And it's by far one of the best reads I've had in a very long time, and I highly recommend it.
Yes, definitely, 100%. Next time, we'll be back in 2 Fridays from now. We'll be back August 7th, and we'll have read A History of Water in the Middle East by Sabrina Mahfouz, a 2019 play that has premiere at the Royal Court. So if you want to join us in chattering about that, make sure you give it a read before August 7th. It's A History of Water in the Middle East.
There's no fault in loving, no call for shame. Everyone's heart does exactly the same, and once you believe that, you learn how to say, I love who I love, who I love. Then just go and love who you love.
That's the dearly departed Roger Rees as Alfie Byrne in the original cast of of A Man of No Importance.
I'm not over it.
I'm never over it.
Roger Rees is probably one of my top favorite actors of all time.
He is mine as well, and he is absolute perfection on the Man of No Importance cast recording. If you haven't ever checked it out, I highly recommend. But we're coming up on a quarter past, so we've just got one more segment for you, and it's our EastLine news. And as we've mentioned, live Sunday night at 7 p.m., The Importance of Being Earnest on our YouTube channel. You can find the link on all of our social media and in the email we sent out. So that's Sunday at 7 p.m. live show. The show probably will run about an hour 40, hour 45. And post-show, we'll be having drinks on Zoom. So we can't go to Shooters. So if you want to join us, this is an open call to the public. Anybody can join us for a little post-show chatter. Bring your own beverage. And we'll have
BYOB, but teetotalers are welcome.
Yes, of course. I'm a teetotaler, so I would never forget you. So you'll find the link for the Zoom in the YouTube description box. So as soon as you watch the show, at the end of it, you can click the Zoom link in there.
As well, we also, if you guys end up enjoying Earnest, which you're mandated to like it, whether you like it or not. We just announced through our usual email blasts, and if you're not signed up for our email blasts, you won't know about this. We are putting up signups for our upcoming virtual events. We plan to make the virtual events a recurring thing until theater is able to reopen again. And we want you guys to help us out and join us. So there's going to be a link going out to a Google sign up on Monday. You check that out. If you were a subscriber to our mailing list, you would have had the link already. So gotta get on that subscribing list.
You can subscribe right on our website, eastlinetheater.org.
Yes, check out our website where you guys can sign up for any upcoming events. We hope you guys will lend us your talents.
Also coming up, not this Sunday, but the following Sunday, book club will be reading Mother Courage and Her Children by Bertolt Brecht in translation by Tony Kushner. So if you want to join us for that, all are welcome. It's a free weekly event that goes via Zoom, obviously, in these trying times. If you have enjoyed listening tonight to tonight's Insomnia, we will be back here Friday, August 7th at midnight for more chatter.
Yes, more chatter and mayhem and maybe less technical difficulties. Well, we're going to start taking 2 weeks between our episodes because, you can't rush beauty.
So we have time to work out our technical difficulties.
Yes, so we can work out what technical difficulties we want to have so we can schedule them ahead of time. So thank you guys, as always, for sticking with us into the wee hours of the morning.
The Irish accent's never going away tonight, is it?
No, it's not. No, it's not. The truth is rarely pure, never simple. Though he hid his Irish accent, so yeah, he hid his accent. Let's give one more.
Should I mention your sunburn again?
No, do not mention my pale Irish skin. Stop it! Stop it! It's not making me feel bad. The sunblock was expired. It was a conspiracy. So I just want to say thank you, everyone, for sticking with us. We're really excited to be presenting The Importance of Being Earnest to you guys on Sunday.
One of our favorites. One of our favorites. I just want to say it's hilarious. I've now heard the play probably a dozen times, and I'm still laughing about it.
And you can see him right there on that screen, the immortal Oscar Wilde. Gone too soon, but his work lives on in us, and the way we're able to express ourselves. That's why he's my hero. That's it for us tonight, everybody. I'm Dan Higgins.
I'm Nicole Saban.
And as always, remember, clap, clap.